So let's move on to a couple of other mechanisms there. This was just an example of one we've done for one of our clients, where you can see this is the same site, full size, full screen width, and then on a handset it goes straight down to the most important thing when I said, 1, 2, 3, those prioritized pieces of content and functionality. And this is another discussion that happens very frequently. Do I need a mobile app or do I need a website? And I saw in the Billy Crystal clip again, how many apps have you got? I really strongly think that a mobile website is 100% necessary, but an app is maybe nice to have, not necessary. Really the thing that differentiates it is that an app is really useful if you need to access things about the hardware, like the camera or the gyroscope. So for instance, if you turn your phone at a different orientation, it does something quite special, and that's why apps are wonderful for games, because they do all sorts of, you can tilt it and it can change the way that the movement of the character in the game. But if you're talking about content related to career opportunities, you don't have any need for that. So an app is actually probably too much of an expenditure. The main reason being it's difficult to maintain. In order to reach the widest audience, you need to make sure that your app is actually developed 3 or 4 times. Once for Apple iOS, once for Android, once for BlackBerry. Has anyone got BlackBerry in here? I know we're in Canada. This is amazing. So we did this on the poll that was set up on the Symposium website. The majority of people had iPhones, which is a real great shift, because I think had you done that 2 or 3 years ago in Canada, the majority of people would have had BlackBerry devices, right? And I think it's a bit of an issue for BlackBerry in that their latest phone, the Z10, is it Z or Z? I'm never quite sure, is actually a fantastic phone, but no one's bought it simply because they lost so much ground to Apple when they got it wrong for 2 or 3 years. And you can see that how getting something wrong totally destroys your brand. So if you look at it from a hardware manufacturer, and then you think of it from a content provider, which is what all of us are, if you get it wrong, people go somewhere else. The main thing I say is you want to be platform agnostic. I was looking at some statistics for a website that we built and managed for a client, and one page had 694 different devices try to access it. And that's just in the US alone, right? So if you take this on a global scale, in fact, I believe the statistics are that there are around 7,000 different devices in circulation. And if you consider the challenge of trying to build something to support all of those devices at a reasonable cost, it's actually impossible. So what I say is be platform agnostic. It means that build it so that your content will work on everything. Usually using a website is the way forward. Use something like HTML5, which is a standard. Always adhere to standards wherever possible. HTML5 is the godsend at the moment for mobile technology, because it's got a lot of the interactive components that you used to use Flash for, but we don't need to use Flash anymore. In fact, Flash is pretty much dead for all intents and purposes. And I would urge you to look at your video content, by the way, because a lot of your video content may have been developed for in Flash video, and it won't play back on phones anymore. And of course, the key thing here is to make sure you make it as easy for the end user as possible. So what you want to do is automatically identify what type of device they've got and make sure you serve up content that will work on that device. So these are some really, really important tips to take into consideration. Now, the combination of social, local and mobile, we love acronyms and technology, so SOLOMO is a great one. In fact, I need to update this. This should now turn into GLOSOMO, because it's global, social, mobile. It's gone beyond local now, right? This is a big mobile world we're involved with. This is very much how people are using their phones, again with some Canada-centric data here. You can see the frequency of social network visits on smartphones amongst the audience demographic we're interested in particular here is very high. We're seeing over 60% of them, 66 in fact, are visiting on a daily basis their social networks, and over the entire audience group, they're visiting once a month at least. I mean, that's actually a really small figure to say once a month. I would say 70 to 80% of college students are visiting social networks on a daily basis on their phones. But this is where it gets really exciting. Well, exciting for me anyway, is the fact that people are sharing information on a daily basis on their phones. And if you think about the opportunity there to push wonderful content about what you've got to offer, why it's a great thing to get involved with. There's a great organisation to study with and a great organisation to work with. People are very, very happy to share that information, and this is what I call organic marketing. You're not really paying for them to share it, but what you're doing is you're facilitating the sharing of that content. And this is where mobile is really useful, because people act very instantaneously with their phones. So they'll, be walking or sitting somewhere in transit, as it were. They find a piece of information, and immediately, if it's not necessarily what they're looking for, they might think, but I know someone who'd be interested in this, so they'll post it out. They'll post it onto Facebook, or they'll tweet it out. And immediately you've got what I call an organic referral. It's great when that works. It actually costs you nothing except for the sort of the mind to go and to put it into place in the first place. So we actually implement a lot of this stuff in websites we build, and we take advantage of the location piece and give a bit more of an immersive element to the content. And one thing you can see here is that you use something like Google Maps as an example to tell people where you are in terms of the location that they'll be working, and then give them a bit more information about it. It's not just about going to work, it's also about what can I do afterwards. I might want to go to the gym, I might need to have a bank nearby, so you can have what's nearby searches that show up the various things that people will be interested in doing outside of work as well as at work. It makes them think that you're more interested in the location of the work-life balance aspect of employment than just come and work for us, do your job duties and then go home. And again, it creates a very good perception of what it's like to work somewhere. The screen on the right is particularly useful if you think about the ability to identify where someone is and then calculate the distance from where they are to somewhere that they want to go to. And one of the things that tends to be the quite preventative for people who have expressed an interest in a job and then don't take it is because it takes them too long to get to work. So if you actually give them the facility to figure that out before they even applied for a position, they would actually think they'd know straight away whether or not it was close enough to be suitable for them, and they wouldn't waste their time or your time by applying. And I think it should be true for every recruiter in this room that the amount of time you waste on screening unsuitable applications is one of the things you wish you could cut out of your life. So providing facilities like this really makes a big difference. The other thing is that mobile users really like imagery and video on their phones, right? So video sharing is quite a big thing. So if you've got content about an opportunity, why don't you include some sort of visual assets with it? In this example here, these job requirements could be anything. They could be a description of any opportunity you've got on offer, but the key thing is to, in context, also include images that are related to the opportunity and where it's located. And this is a great place to include your videos and profiles and testimonials. And I know I was having a discussion yesterday with Nancy about 80 videos were being done by students themselves, user-contributed content, which is phenomenal. This is the perfect place to put it, in context with the opportunities you're offering. So at that point, you create a much greater chance of conversion. And this is really what you need to do to make sure people can actually move beyond consuming the information. What's the call to action? And I think this is where people get it wrong a lot of the time. They don't provide enough of a mechanism for people to do something after they've engaged with your content. So one of the facilities we tend to see here is that you can send to your email and then someone will go and complete an application form later when they're at a desktop or a laptop device, because it's quite difficult to do full applications on a tablet or a phone. But the other thing is to provide social sharing tools. So you can see here we've got a number of tools that allow people to tweet the opportunity straight out. So I know you've got the facility on the ACE website for employers to post jobs. It would be great if you could tweet those specific jobs out from there rather than just following the ACE group or the employer on their Twitter page, right? So the difference here is that you're tweeting out a particular role, and build those mechanisms in, and what you start to have is a much more organic method of marketing. Now, one of the big discussion points, and I feel I must touch on it a little bit because otherwise you might say, oh, I was hoping someone would mention this, but they didn't, is the concept of applying via a mobile device. I don't know if anyone ever thought about if this was possible or not. Has anyone here got any facility for someone to make an application using a mobile device? Have they ever seen it? No, exactly. This is the big issue. You've got all this engagement occurring on a mobile device, handset or tablet, and then you're not allowing people to follow it through effectively. It's a very difficult challenge because a lot of the time it's hard to fill in all those fields in a form on a mobile device. You haven't got enough time, or it's just difficult to type in the content. So try and use alternative mechanisms such as bringing a LinkedIn profile as the application, part of the application process. This can work really effectively. So a LinkedIn profile in essence is a resume, and a lot of people tend to keep it quite up to date. And what actually is happening at the moment, which is really exciting, is that students are starting to use LinkedIn. About 3 or 4 years ago they didn't touch it, but now they realise that it's a great way to interact and create connections. So if you can embed LinkedIn as part of your application process, you'll start to see a much faster rate of conversions, and certainly it gives you insight much more quickly. You can still follow up if you need more information, but I think it's really worth considering. And I know we've got a session on LinkedIn at some point this afternoon, the social resume, I believe it's called, and I think that would tie in very nicely with the ability to apply using LinkedIn on a mobile device. So it's just something worth bearing in mind as a possible concept.